There are three critical moments in the life of an empath that are so psychologically destabilizing, so inwardly shattering, that Carl Jung dedicated much of his clinical work to decoding how sensitive individuals could make it through without breaking apart. What makes these moments particularly dangerous is how quietly they sneak in. They don't come with explosions or clear warning signs. Instead, they slip into your life, masked as common emotional exchanges, standard relationship struggles, or casual daily interactions. But don't be fooled. These seemingly minor experiences can dismantle your sense of identity, corrode your psychological boundaries, and entangle you in long-term self-abandonment that can last years or even decades. Jung referred to these as thresholds of psychic dissolution, points at which your inner world threatens to collapse. And unless an empath applies a very specific psychological survival method, Jung warned, they'd either lose themselves entirely or have to shut down their empathy just to keep functioning. Today we're going to break down each of these moments, explore why they pose such deep internal danger, and most importantly, learn the survival framework Jung created to help sensitive individuals preserve their sense of self while navigating the storm. Carl Gustav Jung saw something most of his peers missed entirely: that some personality types aren't just vulnerable to mental illness, but face existential threats that stem from the structure of their psyche, not from pathology. Born in 1875 in Switzerland, Jung began his career working with Sigmund Freud, but eventually split from Freud to pioneer his own groundbreaking model of the mind. His theories on psychological types, the collective unconscious, and the journey of individuation redefined how we understand human consciousness. But it was his work with what he termed feeling types and introverted intuitives that led to his discovery of these three pivotal and perilous moments. In his seminal work, Psychological Types, 1921, and the later essay, The Development of Personality, 1934, Jung began chronicling patterns he observed among highly empathic people, those who were mentally healthy, deeply compassionate, and capable of functioning well in society, yet who arrived at certain life stages completely undone by internal crisis. He called these experiences thresholds of unbearable knowing. In his years of clinical observation at the Burg-Holzli Psychiatric Hospital and later in private practice, Jung noticed these clients would show up at specific turning points in life, unable to articulate exactly what was wrong, but profoundly aware at a soul level that something essential within them had shifted. They described feeling hollow, disconnected from themselves, or stuck in a mental and emotional quicksand. Every effort they made to feel better just dragged them deeper. After extensive study, Jung isolated three distinct psychological emergencies that repeated over and over in the lives of these empathic individuals. He saw these as defining crossroads moments that determined whether someone would move forward into true individuation or become trapped in chronic patterns of unconscious identification with others. But before we break down these three moments, we need to understand what Jung meant by empathy, a definition quite different from today's casual usage. In Jung's model, empathy wasn't just emotional attunement. He described certain individuals as having what he termed psychic permeability. These are people with unusually thin barriers between their own unconscious and that of others. They don't merely understand how someone feels, they absorb those feelings. They walk into a room and sense emotional tension without anyone speaking. They intuit lies not through deduction but through something visceral. It's as if their psyche operates like an emotional sponge, soaking up the hidden energies around them. But Jung didn't idealize this. He saw it as a fragile sensitivity, a psychological exposure that, while powerful, left people vulnerable to breakdown if they didn't develop boundaries and strategies to manage it. And this brings us to the first of the 3 deadly moments he identified: the realization of non-reciprocity. This moment doesn't arrive as a loud betrayal or some obvious rejection. It comes as a slow-burning epiphany. It's that gut-wrenching clarity that the emotional depth and understanding you so freely offer to others are not, and maybe never have been, returned in kind. And it's not necessarily because the people around you are cruel or selfish. It's often because they simply lack the capacity for that level of emotional exchange. What makes this moment deadly isn't the lack of reciprocity itself. It's what it reveals. You've spent years, possibly your entire life, believing that if you love deeply enough, explain yourself well enough, show up consistently enough, others will eventually mirror that back. And in this moment, you discover they won't. Not because they're unwilling, but because they're unable. Jung documented this moment in Modern Man in Search of a Soul. One patient, a woman who had invested years into a close friendship, was stunned when she reached out during a personal crisis and was met not with warmth, but with a shallow deflection. This wasn't just disappointing. It was a revelation. It exposed the fact that the relationship had always been one-sided. She had always been the giver. Her friend had always been the taker. She'd simply been too caught up in giving to notice it. This realization hits with terrifying force. You start seeing how many of your relationships were built on false assumptions, that you were never truly seen, never truly held. And worst, you may start questioning your own worthiness for real support. Some empaths, Jung observed, responded to this moment by turning inward and blaming themselves. Others grew cold and detached, deciding no one is capable of true empathy. Both responses, Jung noted, were dangerous extremes. He described this pendulum swing as psychic inflation followed by deflation. First, you believe your empathy is powerful enough to create reciprocity. Then, when that fails, you believe reciprocity doesn't exist at all. Neither belief is healthy. Both can trap you in cycles of disappointment or isolation. So, what's the survival protocol? To survive this first deadly moment, Jung proposed a concept he called conscious discrimination. In Psychological Types, he explained that the path to individuation requires us to discern, not judge, but discern who is capable of mutual emotional exchange and who is not. It's not about labeling others as good or bad. It's about acknowledging reality. Not everyone has developed the emotional bandwidth for reciprocity, and it's not your job to teach them or prove your worth until they change. Jung likened this to gardening. You don't try to grow orchids in desert soil. It's not that the soil is evil, it's simply not the right environment. Applying this protocol in real life means learning to recalibrate your investments. Let's say you have a coworker who constantly vents to you. You listen, empathize, offer thoughtful insights. Then, one day, you open up about something important to you. Instead of meeting you with the same care, they quickly change the subject or offer surface-level advice. The old version of you would try harder, maybe think you said it wrong, or even feel guilty for having needs. But using Jung's survival protocol, you instead recognize this person isn't wired for reciprocity. That's not a moral flaw, it's just data. You note it, accept it, and stop offering your deepest energy where it won't be mirrored. You don't have to cut them out of your life, but you do stop expecting from them what they're not able to give. Jung emphasized that this discernment is essential for the empath's mental survival. Without it, you burn out trying to make relationships work that never had the foundation for true mutuality. Worse, you might miss out on connections that do offer reciprocity because you're too drained to recognize them. In The Development of Personality, Jung wrote, "The greatest burden the conscious personality can bear is the unconscious expectation that all relationships be equal in depth and reciprocity. Nature doesn't work that way. Some relationships are deep, others are shallow. Wisdom lies in knowing which is which." This kind of conscious calibration is what builds tempered empathy, empathy that's thoughtful, protective, and sustainable. But it takes practice. It requires letting go of the fantasy that everyone should meet you where you are and instead acknowledging who can. That's the first deadly moment and how to survive it. But the second one? It doesn't strike like a lightning bolt. It builds gradually, almost invisibly. And by the time you realize it's happening, you may have already lost something vital. Jung called the second deadly moment the dissolution of self through chronic accommodation. It creeps in subtly, often over years. You bend, adjust, respond to others' needs so consistently that one day someone asks, "What do you want?" And you realize, with a kind of internal panic, that you genuinely have no idea. Your own preferences, your instincts, your desires, they've been buried under layer upon layer of adapting to others. You've become so focused on smoothing out tension, on being who everyone needs you to be, that your authentic self has faded into a background hum you can no longer hear. Jung observed this frequently in clinical settings, especially in empathic individuals, often women, though it applies broadly to anyone whose psychological identity has been molded around managing others' comfort. In his essays on analytical psychology, Jung introduced the concept of the persona, the mask we wear in social settings. A necessary social tool, the persona allows us to function in the world. But for empaths, the persona often multiplies. You build a different mask for every role: friend, sibling, co-worker, partner. And you become a master of playing each part so well no one even suspects it's not real. Over time, the persona begins to replace the self. You're no longer playing a role. You are the role. Jung called this state ego dissolution by identification with the persona. One patient once described it to him as feeling like a hologram, appearing whole on the outside, but empty on the inside. This metaphor stuck with Jung. He referenced it repeatedly as the most accurate depiction of what happens when someone becomes entirely absorbed into a false identity built on accommodation. The danger isn't just that you don't know what you want. The deeper danger arises when you try to reclaim your selfhood.
The instinct is often to swing hard in the opposite direction, to stop accommodating completely, to rebel against every version of yourself others expect. But Jung warned against this. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he referenced the principle of enantiodromia, the idea that any extreme will eventually flip into its opposite. If you've spent years over-accommodating, the reaction might be to become rigid, cold, and unyielding, not out of authentic empowerment, but as a defense against how lost you feel. This false empowerment isn't the real you either. It's just another mask, this time in armor. Jung believed the only way out of this identity crisis was a return to authenticity. And the path to that begins with a technique he called active imagination. Active imagination is Jung's method for reconnecting with the authentic self, buried beneath the layers of social performance. It's not daydreaming, and it's not fantasy. It's a structured dialogue with the unconscious,
A deliberate inquiry into your inner world, done with the intention of discovering what is real for you, not what you've been trained to think or feel. Jung described it as entering into a conversation with your psyche. You ask a question like, "What do I actually enjoy?" And then sit with the silence. You wait, not for the socially acceptable response, not for the answer that would please others, but for the whisper of your true preference. It may take time. That inner voice might be quiet at first, nearly drowned out by the chorus of internalized expectations. But with patience, it begins to emerge. Jung likened this to learning to hear a whisper in a noisy room. You must first quiet the false voices, the inner critics, the social scripts, the well-worn habits of pleasing. And then you must have the courage to listen. This process also involves what Jung called the willingness to disappoint. Reclaiming your authentic self often means saying no where you once said yes. It means asserting boundaries where there were none. It means expressing needs that may confuse, disappoint, or even frustrate the people who benefited from your endless accommodation. That can be terrifying, especially for empaths, whose entire identity is built around minimizing others' discomfort. But Jung insisted, this discomfort is the price of self-reclamation. In his memoir, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung shared how he experienced this himself after his break from Freud. He'd been shaping his ideas to fit Freud's model, suppressing his own insights for the sake of maintaining the relationship. Once the rupture occurred, Jung found himself disoriented, unsure where Freud ended and he began. It took years of inner work, hours spent in active imagination, dialoguing with the unconscious, journaling his visions in what would become the Red Book, before his authentic psychological theories could surface. This wasn't merely an intellectual process. It was spiritual, emotional, and deeply personal. Jung described it as walking through a dark forest where the only light came from within. Let's make it practical. Imagine you've been invited to a party. In the past, your instinct might be to say yes automatically to preserve harmony, to meet expectations, to avoid disappointing anyone. But the survival protocol has you do something different. You pause and ask, do I actually want to go? Not, should I? Not, what will they think if I don't? Just, do I want to? And then you wait for the real answer. It might be a clear yes. It might be a no. It might be, I want to go, but only for an hour. Whatever the answer is, you honor it. You act on it. And in doing so, you begin rebuilding the connection to your authentic self, one honest choice at a time. This is the slow, patient, and courageous work of re-becoming yourself. And it's essential. Because without it, the empath's life becomes a hollow performance. With it, you regain not only your identity, but your freedom. But even this reclaimed self must face the third and final deadly moment. And this one? It's the most existential of them all. The third and perhaps most soul-wrenching deadly moment Jung identified is the recognition of fundamental aloneness. This isn't the surface-level loneliness of being single or the sting of unreciprocated care that was the first moment. This is something deeper, more existential. It's the gut-level realization that no matter how much someone loves you, no matter how deeply they try to understand you, they will never fully grasp the entirety of your inner experience. And if you're an empath, that hits like a psychological earthquake.
You've spent your life perfecting the art of understanding others, feeling into their wounds, anticipating their needs, interpreting unspoken signals. You've believed, often unconsciously, that this level of understanding could and should be mutual. That if you could just explain well enough, guide clearly enough, others would eventually understand you the same way. But in this third moment, you realize the truth. They can't. Not because they don't care, not because they aren't trying, but because the nature of consciousness makes total understanding impossible. There's a gap between your subjective reality and theirs that can never be fully crossed. Jung explored this in depth in his later writings, particularly The Undiscovered Self. He stated that the more conscious a person becomes of their own nature, the more they realize how fundamentally alone they are. This isn't pessimism, it's clarity. It's the sober recognition that we each live in a world no one else can fully access. For most people, this might be a philosophical idea, interesting, maybe unsettling. But for the empath, who has built an entire emotional architecture on mutual understanding, it can be crushing. Some of Jung's patients described it as living in a glass box, able to see others, speak to them, care for them, but never quite touch them. Others described it as speaking a language no one else could learn, no matter how many times they tried to translate. Jung had been there himself. After the break with Freud, after his descent into the unconscious, he found himself alone with visions and insights that no one else understood. He called it the most dangerous period of his life, not because of physical threats, but because of the spiritual isolation. This deadly moment often tempts people into psychic withdrawal. If connection can never be complete, why bother? If you'll always be a little misunderstood, why keep trying? The pull to retreat, to close down, to stop opening your inner world to others becomes strong. And Jung warned, this is the path to what he called psychic death, being alive in the body, but shut off in the soul. So what's the survival protocol? Jung's survival protocol for the recognition of fundamental aloneness is something profound and paradoxical. He called it the acceptance of the paradox. Here's the paradox. You are, inescapably, alone in your own consciousness, and genuine connection is still possible and meaningful. Both are true. Neither cancels out the other. Psychological maturity, Jung argued in Mysterium Coniunctionis, doesn't come from solving paradoxes, but from learning to live inside them. This means accepting that no one will ever completely understand you, and still choosing to share yourself anyway. It means recognizing the limits of empathy and still offering it. It means knowing the gap between souls is real, but deciding that the effort to connect is still worth it. Instead of demanding perfect understanding, you begin to appreciate partial understanding. Instead of withdrawing because no one gets it, you start to see value in the fragments of connection that do exist. Two people on opposite sides of a river can never stand in the same spot, but they can wave, call across, even send messages. The river doesn't erase the relationship. It simply shapes it. So what does this look like in practice? Let's say you're sharing something deeply personal with someone you care about. You can feel they don't fully get it. They're trying, they're present, but there's a gap. The old version of you might try harder, over-explain, or leave the conversation frustrated and unseen. The survival protocol has you do something gentler. You say, I know this might be hard to fully grasp, and I appreciate that you're listening. You release them from the burden of complete comprehension.
And just as importantly, you release yourself from the burden of being fully understood. But the survival protocol goes one step further. Jung emphasized the importance of self-companionship. If you're alone in your psyche, you must become excellent company for yourself. You develop an internal relationship, a rich, compassionate, ongoing dialogue with your inner world. In The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious, Jung called this internal witnessing. It's the practice of observing your own experience with curiosity, kindness, and depth. You notice your reactions, explore your feelings, and become fascinated by your own complexity. You stop outsourcing validation and instead begin to recognize yourself. This isn't narcissism, it's psychological necessity. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." That inner awakening is the foundation of authentic connection. Once you're rooted in self-understanding, you no longer seek relationships to complete you, but to walk beside you. You no longer need to be fully seen to feel whole. This is the essence of tempered empathy. And it's the state that emerges when you've moved through all three deadly moments, not bypassed them, not ignored them, but survived them with consciousness and care. Jung observed that those who made it through all three deadly moments didn't come out the same. They emerged transformed, possessing what he called tempered empathy. This kind of empathy is not raw or naive. It's been forged through fire. It's empathy refined by experience, strengthened by discernment, and grounded in authenticity. Tempered empathy has three essential qualities. First, it's selective. After surviving the moment of non-reciprocity, you no longer scatter your emotional energy indiscriminately. You practice conscious discrimination. You invest where mutuality exists, and you stop trying to extract connection from those who can't give it. Second, it's boundaried. After enduring the dissolution of self through over-accommodation, you understand the necessity of maintaining a strong relationship with your own needs and preferences. You no longer lose yourself in others' expectations. You stay rooted in who you are, even while understanding someone else. Third, it's realistic. Having faced the crushing recognition of fundamental aloneness, you stop expecting perfect understanding. You embrace the beauty of imperfect connection. You welcome the flawed, human, messy reality of relating across the gap of individual consciousness. This kind of empathy is not only more sustainable, it's more powerful. It doesn't burn you out because it respects your limits. It doesn't leave you bitter because it honors your boundaries. It allows you to remain open-hearted without bleeding out emotionally. Jung described individuals who reached this state as wounded healers. In The Psychology of the Transference, he explored this archetype, someone who has suffered deeply, who has stared into the psychological abyss and come back with wisdom. Not just information, not just theory, lived understanding. The wounded healer doesn't help from a pedestal. They help from within the trench. They don't offer naive hope, they offer hard-earned clarity. They've survived the darkness, and because of that, they can light the way for others. Jung once wrote in a letter to a struggling patient, "You cannot save anyone. You can only light the path with your own example. And to light the path, you must first survive your own inner night." Each of these deadly moments, the disillusionment of non-reciprocity, the disintegration of self through over-adaptation, and the existential ache of aloneness, are initiations. They strip you down, not to destroy you, but to invite your transformation. They demand your full attention, your conscious participation, your willingness to move through discomfort without numbing, blaming or abandoning yourself. But if you can do that, if you can walk through the fire awake, you don't just survive, you evolve. These aren't just psychological hurdles. They are rites of passage into a more integrated version of yourself. Jung didn't see these crises as flaws to be fixed, but as thresholds that initiate us into deeper layers of consciousness and maturity. The first moment, recognizing non-reciprocity, initiates you into discernment. It wakes you up to the idea that not all connections are equal, and that your empathy must be paired with wisdom. The second moment, losing yourself in endless accommodation, initiates you into authenticity. It breaks the illusion that being everything for everyone keeps you safe and invites you to remember who you actually are beneath the personas. The third moment, facing the truth of your fundamental aloneness, initiates you into self-companionship. It teaches you to stop waiting for someone else to fully understand you, and instead become the one who never abandons your own inner experience. But Jung also issued a serious warning. If these moments are navigated unconsciously, they can result in what he called psychic death. Not physical death, but a deep disconnection from your inner world. The empath who doesn't make it through these trials might shut down their sensitivity completely, turning cold and self-protective. Or they might remain trapped in self-neglect, giving endlessly without boundary, until there's nothing left of their own essence. That's why Jung stressed the need for awareness. You must be able to name the moment while you're in it. Say to yourself, "This is the first deadly moment," or "This is the ego dissolution Jung described," or "This is the ache of existential solitude." Naming it gives you space to respond consciously rather than react from fear or wounding. He also spoke to the necessity of being witnessed. In Psychology of the Unconscious, Jung emphasized how important it is to have someone who can hold space for your process without fixing, minimizing, or rushing you through it. This witness could be a therapist, a trusted friend, or even your own higher self through journaling or inner dialogue. The witness doesn't carry you, but they anchor you. They remind you that you're not imagining the intensity, that your experience is valid, that others have walked this path and come through the other side. So can you. Jung shared his own experience with these moments in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, describing a time after his separation from Freud when he plunged into what he called a confrontation with the unconscious. He endured visions, inner voices, and disorienting psychological shifts. He was navigating all three deadly moments at once: betrayal through non-reciprocity, loss of self through years of intellectual compromise, and the crushing solitude of inner awakening. He didn't resist the process. Instead, he chose to engage it. He developed the technique of active imagination as a survival method. He created the Red Book, a record of his dialogues with the unconscious. He maintained his professional responsibilities even while experiencing profound internal transformation. And he trusted that meaning would eventually emerge from the chaos. That trust paid off. The insights Jung gathered during that period became the foundation for his most significant contributions to modern psychology. And the protocols he used to survive became the ones he passed on to his patients, and now, indirectly, to us. So if you're facing one of these moments, if you're waking up to one-sided relationships, or realizing how deeply you've lost yourself, or staring into the void of unshareable inner truth, know this: you are not broken. You are not failing. You are being initiated. These are not moments to bypass or numb out of. They are psychological gateways into the most authentic, integrated, sustainable version of yourself. One that feels with wisdom, connects with boundaries, and walks through life awake. And if you've recognized yourself in any part of this journey, know that your experience is part of a larger story, a necessary story, one that, once named, becomes navigable. If this deep dive into Jungian survival protocols for empaths resonated with you, if you've faced one or more of these initiations, share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in the darkness. And if you found value in this exploration, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is name the moment and remind each other, you're not dying, you're becoming.